Happy 1 year of knitting socks to me! Welcome, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. My name is Emily from Crochet Creations, and if you're new to my channel, I'm so glad that you stumbled upon me. I'd love for you to stick around, and for those who are coming back, I'm so glad to have you again. Today, I wanted to share my experience of knitting socks for 1 whole year. So let me tell you a little bit of backstory. I wanted to learn to knit for a while. I've been crocheting since I was 9 years old. I am 27 now, I think. And so I've been doing that for a really long time, but I've always wanted knit socks in particular. For some reason, I was intimidated to start trying. I knew that I could pick it up if I had the right kinds of resources and tutorials, but I also felt like most tutorials are made for someone without any fiber arts understanding, and so I felt like those weren't exactly for me as a crocheter switching over to knitting, and I was intimidated. I was not sure that I could do it, but I finally last year decided that I was going to learn how to knit. And so last April 2021, I began the journey of learning how to knit. I stockpiled some supplies I thought I needed, found some free patterns and some tutorials, and I taught myself how to knit. And oh my goodness, what a journey. I'm so glad that I have been able to unlock this skill and start on this journey of broadening my fiber artist skills. I've loved it. I've loved learning how to knit, and I have so much more to learn, and I'm so glad to be on that journey. But back to socks. Socks were really the reason I wanted to learn how to knit in the first place. And so after a couple small little projects to get my toes in the water as far as learning knitting, I dove into socks with the intention to learn how to knit socks, and boy did I learn. About the middle of May 2021 is when I first started knitting socks. So it's been just about a year of knitting socks, and so I wanted to show you what my journey has looked like, all the socks that I've made, answer some questions that people ask me on my Instagram. It's at Crochet Creations, by the way, if you don't know that, so you can follow me over there and see everything that I'm working on in real time. It's kind of hot today, so I have the window open, so you might hear a little bit of background noise, but I have my microphone, so hopefully that'll help a little bit with the sound. I wanted to just dive right in and share everything about my sock making journey this past year. So exciting. First of all, statistics. And I'll show you. I've got lots of socks to talk about, so I'll try to be quick. But first of all, stats. And I'll make sure to put up some fun little graphs over here because I can nerd out about that, and I hope that you can too. I've got my notes over here. So first and foremost, I knit 23 pairs of socks in a year. Well, okay, one of them is a whip. I'm counting that one whip because it is an ongoing whip. It'll be done pretty soon, within the next couple weeks, I think. So we're just gonna count it. 23 pairs of socks in a year. I wish it was 24 because that sounds like a nice rounded number. Toe up versus cuff down. 13% of my socks were toe up and 87% were cuff down. Fingering versus DK weight yarn. 87% were fingering and 13% were DK. As far as who the recipient was, 48% of the socks I knit were for me, and that left 52%, which were as gifts. If we want to break that down further, 30% were given to my daughter Georgia. She's a toddler, she's about 18 months right now. 9% were given to my husband, 13% were given to other people. Adult versus child socks, 65% were made for adult sizes and 35% were made for child sizes. Georgia's gotten a lot of socks. Vanilla socks versus a pattern sock of some sort, 57% were vanilla socks and 43% were pattern socks. And if you don't know, a vanilla sock means just the most basic style of sock. You just knit a knit stitch in the round or stock knit stitch in the round, and so they're very simple compared to all the different patterns, ribbing, color work, anything. Not patterned, just vanilla. The most simple sock design is known as a vanilla sock. Purpose of that sock? For fun. 74% of the socks I knit were just for fun, just because I wanted to. 17% of the socks I knit were for test knits that I volunteered for. And 9% were involved with designs that I had as a knitwear designer. So that's super exciting. Hand-dyed yarn versus using commercial yarn. 74% were using hand-dyed yarn and 26% were made with commercial yarn. And by hand-dyed versus commercial, I mean commercial is something you could get at like a online store like a Knit Picks or from Michael's, or you could get from a craft store. Yeah, and hand dyed is pretty self-explanatory, something that an actual individual person that usually is a small business owner will dye the yarn themselves, and so they came up with the colorway and how the color is dispersed style of socks. So 9% of the socks I had involved cables or some kind of cabling stitching, and then 22% involved some sort of colorwork pattern on it. When I knit these socks, so I tried to see the distribution of my sock knitting. My final push to actually knit socks was because Summer Sock Camp 2021 was just around the corner, as well as Sock Week. So those are hosted by Kay Litton of Crazy Sock Lady and Natalie of Nitty Natty, respectively. Those are 2 sock making make-alongs that I knew about and I wanted to participate in. As far as Summer Sock Camp, 17% of the socks I made throughout the whole year were made during Summer Sock Camp, so within that summer period. That's right when I first began knitting socks. And then 17% of my socks were knit in December, can you guess, for gifts. And then 17% were knit in February. Those are all by statistics for when I knit my socks, and I think that's really interesting to look back on and kind of compare, and it'll be cool to see over this next year what the spread looks like as far as socks go. Let's get into all the different actual socks. I've got my notebook here. I tried to keep track of my socks and figure out kind of in what order I completed them so that I can talk about them that way. But I'll do the best I can to kind of show the socks in a few different ways, and we'll try to get through this quickly. I will make sure to have all the information up on the screen so that if I don't quite remember the yarn or the pattern or anything like that, that you can still get that information in case there's something that you are eyeing. And for a lot of these hand-dyed yarns, you can't necessarily find these skeins from the dyers anymore, but they're all dyers that I love, and so I would definitely recommend looking and seeing what other yarns that they have either in stock or that they will be offering for pre-orders, because it's definitely worth supporting a small business like that. But we're going to try to get through this quickly and share all 23 socks that I knit or am knitting at the moment in my first year of knitting socks. Okay, first pair of socks ever that I made. Ta-da! Oh, I was gonna get my sock blockers. Silly me. Hold, please. First pair of socks I ever made. These are all freshly washed and blocked. They might be a little wrinkly, but they're, you know, this is the best they're gonna get. My first pair of socks. This is from Loops and Thread Perfect Pair. It's Michael's in-house brand, and the colorway is called River. My very first pair of socks ever. I mean, they look pretty good. I still wear them. So it's a vegan yarn blend. It doesn't have wool in it. I think there's a little bit of bamboo viscose, but most of it is some sort of nylon, polyamide kind of blend. So it's an interesting blend, but it's vegan, which is a good option, and it's super inexpensive, like $6 when not on sale or not using a coupon for 100 grams. Really good value. And I had bought this yarn way long before, like 2 years before I started knitting socks, because I knew I wanted to. I just didn't get around to it. It is a toe-up sock. It's got a gusset and a heel flap design. It's just a free pattern. Let's see, Joe Tor is the pattern designer. It fits pretty good, actually. Definitely not ideal. I think it's a little bit loose for me now that I've gotten a little bit more experience, but I think it turned out pretty good. I'm not a super fan of most of these color stripes, actually. I don't really like this blue or this speckly color. This blue is kind of fine. I really like the mint, actually, and that's about it. But I do like this yarn, and I come back to it later, so you'll see that. Okay, my second pair of socks, which is my first pair of Summer Sock Camp socks, was my first pair of cuff down socks. I used Summer Lee's So Basic sock pattern. Yarn is from U2 Knit, I think it's called. It's a Texas-based yarn brand, and I nicknamed these my Texas socks because I bought the yarn in Texas right before we moved from Texas to California last year, and I started knitting on these in the car ride to California. I love how these colors match. I picked them out separately. Just there's like a remnant ball and then this skein, and they're really actually very sturdy. I think it might be a BFL base. I'm not quite sure. I don't remember the base, but it's not like a typical sock base for me. It just feels a little bit different. These are cuff down, heel flap and gusset. Super happy. I was able to get all three cuff, heel and toe because the little scrap I had was 26 grams or 25 grams. So I was able to get all three, which is nice. I do like myself a contrast heel toe and cuff. Super proud of these as my first cuff down sock. Let's talk about some things that I've learned. Learning that knit two together through the back loop and knit two together regular are different stitches. As you can see, that's not a pretty gusset. And that's when I learned that. I always thought that you would use up all 100 grams if you were gonna knit socks, but I found that that isn't necessarily the case, at least in my size. I normally knit like a 64 stitch count sock, around there. But I wanted to use up some yarn, and so I decided to make my daughter Georgia a pair of baby socks. They're a pair of toe-up socks. I think the pattern is by Notorious She. There's some toe-up baby socks. They use a short row heel, and I just knit them out of some scraps of my Texas yarn so that my daughter and I could match. So there's some cute pictures of us both in our sock feet. She has always been a bigger baby, and she had some chunky feet, and so these were not worn very much. So next baby, I guess, will get a chance to wear them. So that was fun to try toe-up socks again. And then I was just on a roll with baby socks for my daughter. I volunteered. This was my first test knit, and it's the Mini Success Socks by the Graceful Tangle. So her Success sock line they're basically vanilla sock patterns. It's a free pattern. And so I did the mini pattern, which is for kiddos. And so I made these for my daughter. This is using Olin, their light fingering base, and the colors, ooh, I can't remember the colors. I think this one is called Nectar, and I can't remember this one off the top of my head. Wow, that's kind of sad. But it's got this beautiful orangey, purpley. It was an afterthought heel sock, which is my first time doing that. So that was kind of fun. I guess it was a forethought heel because you put in some waist yarn and then take the waist yarn out to put in your heel. So I knit these for my daughter Georgia, and same story, they didn't fit her for very long. She's now to the point where she can wear her socks for longer because her feet aren't so chubby, and I'm making them more for her feet rather than to the size that I'm supposed to knit, supposedly for her. Then I tried my hand at knitting a pair of socks for my husband, and this was my last pair that I finished for summer sock camp. My husband's birthday is end of August, and so I got these done just barely in time. These are the Dad Joke socks. The pattern is free by Black Squirrel Berkeley, which funnily enough is not too far away from where I live now, up north of me. It's got this cool rib texture that is not just the same ribbing all the way throughout, and so that was new. This is a toe-up sock with a short row heel, with like a gusset, and heel turn short row thing to like decrease the gusset. I don't know, kind of an interesting construction. They took a really long time, just the ribbing, and I was still fairly new at socks, and toe-up, I was having a hard time. So thank goodness he wanted ankle socks. This yarn, this gray, is by Emma's Yarn, and they're practically perfect sock base. It's Elephant, I think. And then this little tan bit at the cuff is Sewrella yarn Oopsie Mini that I had intended for socks for my husband. But when I asked him what socks he would want, he said he would like gray socks. So gave him some options, and he picked the boring tonal gray, not even speckles. I still think it looks nice, but I think it would not have been my choice of knitting socks, and so that also made it kind of hard to work on them. Anyway, I finished them just in time. He likes them. I think they're a tad long on him, but that's kind of a general trend. I was making my socks a little bit too long, and I think I'm better now at knitting my socks to fit my feet a little bit better. So that was my first pair that I made for my husband, and the last pair I got in summer sock camp. Oh, I guess I didn't say, but I was able to finish one of my Texas socks during Sock Week 2021 with Knitting Daddy, and so I was really proud of myself for being able to finish a sock in a week. It took lots of work, but I did it. Next socks, another test knit from my friend Jazzy, Rosie Birch Designs. I remembered using some of the leftover elephant yarn from Emma's Yarn. These are the Madeira socks. They've got this cool, just a 1x1 cable detail. My first time doing cables, and these socks still fit my daughter. I think I made the foot a bit too long, but I think that because of the stretch and stuff, that they will still continue to fit until they fit really well. It does have a short row heel. I'm not sure what kind. I think it was a shadow wrap heel, but it wasn't labeled as such in the pattern, so I'm not quite sure. But another short row, and it was a cuff down sock. And they actually had, it's a anatomical toe, meaning that the toe is slanted. It's not symmetrical. So you can see the big toe would go on this side and the little toe would go on this side. And for babies, it's a pain in the butt. Not worth trying to get the right sock on their foot, so I would not recommend it for a baby. For an adult, that might be cool, so maybe I should try doing an anatomical sock for myself, but for a baby, it's not worth the effort, to be honest. Next pair of socks, I was on a test knit kick, I guess. I did a test knit for S Knits, and she's been doing a ton of different socks and other patterns with Explore Knits yarn, and I do have some in my stash, so I had volunteered for this test knit. This colorway is called Karma Chameleon and Nano Crystals. Super fun, like pastel-y, peachy, corally, minty. Goodness. Ooh, these are cuff down socks. It too has like a 1x1 cabling cross stitch type of a detail, and it's got a strong heel. Kind of interesting. It's got the triangle underneath, and you do the gusset on the leg, so kind of an interesting feature, and they do fit well. Kind of more similar to like a heel flap and gusset style construction than a short row heel, but still not quite the same. So kind of interesting setup. This sock is the Arate sock by S Knits. Some cute socks, and they got dirty because I wore them when it was like wet outside. Got through my shoes, and so that's kind of sad, but sometimes we make things to look at and sometimes we make things to wear them, and for me, socks are something I want to wear and use well, so I have to be okay with them getting dirty sometimes. I'm trying to go fast through these socks so that you can see all of them. This is going to be a beast of a video to edit. Okay, the next pair of socks I affectionately nicknamed them my Cocoa socks. This is using yarn from Treehouse Knits. She had a cocoa collection. Oh, she had so many beautiful colors in her cocoa collection, and I just couldn't decide. And so I ended up getting a mini skein set. This is the Color Palette sock by Laura Moritz, and I used some leftover of that elephant color, but then I ran out just barely, and so I got an extra little mini of the same elephant color to finish off like a stripe and a toe or something on my second sock, so it was pretty close to having enough. Takes about, I would say, 30 grams to be safe to do all of that. The only thing is I modified the pattern, and looking back I kind of regret it. It's a free pattern, so I'll share with you. It's only written for medium size, which is kind of a bummer, but probably really easy to hack. 15 row stripes for the colors, and then 4 row stripes for the main color in between, which equals 19 rows, and I hated that. That was such an awkward number, so I rounded up, did 16 rows on the stripes, and then on the main color twisted rib sections I did 4 again, so then it would be 20 because I like that number, but in doing so I ended up running out of room, so I had to start the toe without doing the last little bit of the twisted rib section. There would have been a 4 row twisted rib, and you know what, if I hadn't changed the pattern, it would have been fine. And I could have still done that little section because the toe is a spiral toe, so kind of similar to how you might decrease in crochet for amigurumi, like in a circle, and so it decreases faster than a traditional wedge toe that I am used to knitting on my socks, and so it's a kind of a short stubby toe. I think that the color balance would have been a little bit better if I'd had that extra bit of twisted rib in the gray. You live and you learn. I didn't follow the pattern, but some beautiful colors. It was so pretty to see them work up, and I was trying to get them done in time for a Dia de los Muertos last year, and I finished them November 10th or something, so I was pretty close. Not quite, but I do love the movie Coco, and it was really special to be able to work on these while I was watching the movie and to hopefully wear them every time I watch the movie in the future. Alright, another pair of test knit socks. This is the Folklore sock by Fox and Folk. These are for my daughter, and it uses like a seed stitch texture and this color work. Super pretty. It feels very Scandinavian, this sock design, so it just gives me all the like cozy vibes. I ended up making these and deciding that these would be perfect for Christmas socks for my daughter. They didn't quite fit her. They were still plenty big when I knit them. I think I finished them in November, so I was like, you know what, these will work for Christmas. For the colors, I used both of the yarns for my Texas socks, both the lighter beigey red as well as the dark red, and then I also used the green and the cream color are from Sewrella yarn that I used in my own personal Christmas socks. I love this design. This texture is so fun and so cozy looking. They're just a cuff down with this color work on the cuff. It's always two color work? No, it's not always two color work. I did a pretty dang good job considering that it was 3-stranded color work. Go me. I don't think you really needed to catch your floats on this, so that might have helped me in my 3-stranded color work. Yeah, this is my first pair of actual color work socks. I really like that pattern. Next pair of socks, I was ready for a quick make, and so I made some DK socks. This was my first pair of DK socks. I used some Northwoods Fibers yarn to make some DK socks. This is their maple tweed base that's DK? I can't quite remember. But self-striping. The colorway is called Vintage Thanksgiving. They nailed it. I worked up this pair in maybe like 4 days. Maybe. It was super, super quick and just the right kind of like satisfying knit. They were just cuffed down. I used 40 stitches on a size US 3 needle. I used the Crazy Sock Ladies vanilla DK sock pattern that is free just to help with like numbers and stuff as I was still trying to figure things out. I did learn though that I don't like using tweed very much because I just kept wanting to pick off the little naps because it just felt like dirty and unclean to me. Like I just want to pick them off. So now I know that. Probably will stay away from tweeds if I can. They don't sit well with me, and that's just a personal thing. I think this is a beautiful colorway. I finished these just in time for Thanksgiving, I remember. Like the weekend before or the week of Thanksgiving. So I could wear them since they're called Vintage Thanksgiving, so I wanted to make sure I could wear them for Thanksgiving. And now we're moving into December and gift knitting. So, like I said, I wanted to make socks for my whole family. I got the idea after I made these socks for my daughter and realized that they would totally work with a Christmassy theme. And I thought that would be such a fun tradition to start. So I made socks for myself and for my husband as well in December. I was busy. I also made a Christmas sweater. Probably bit off more than I should have. I finished it all in time, so that's fine. This is my husband's pair. This is the Sewrella Oopsie set that I had originally purchased for my husband. I thought, green, that's Christmassy, right? And that tonal is so, so beautiful. Oh, I'm such a big fan. And with the tan as well. I think it looks really nice. And these I did cuff down so that I could help them fit my husband a little bit better. For my toe-up version that I made for his first pair of socks, I've shown you so many, so this is just a refresher. For this pair, they were toe-up, and the bind-off edge was a little bit tight, and so I thought that it would go easier if I made a pair of vanilla socks that were cast on at the top, that I'd have an easier time making it stretchy as a cast on. And so I did that. So he says they fit him better up top, and I made them not quite as long so that they fit him better in the length as well. We both have 64 stitch count socks, but his feet are longer than mine. I don't remember how many rows I did, so next time I make him a pair of socks, I'll have to check. But I think they look really pretty and that they coordinate really well with my daughter's socks. They're kind of contrasty a bit, but this tan color definitely matches some of the colorwork colors. So our socks didn't necessarily match, but they looked all right together, I think, and they were all unique to each of us. And then for my personal Christmas socks, I decided to knit Cold Winter Nights by Julianne Knitter, so Twin Stitches Designs. And I used some Sewrella yarn. This yarn is from her Taylor Swift collection. This is the color Ivy, and this white is called Cardigan. Look at that color work. It looks really nice. You can see with wear the more goldish color, that's not dirt, that's like part of the yarn, it's like a gold hint, is coming out more, which is really, really interesting. This sock has a rib texture where it's not color work, and I actually feel like they fit really, really well. So I really do love these socks. That color work just looks so nice. I think it looks nicer in the viewfinder than it does in person even. It looks so nice. I love it. This is a good pattern. I really did enjoy it. It's limited in sizing, unfortunately. There's only a couple sizes, but I do enjoy that pattern. I'm glad that I got a chance to make it. Okay, here's a little tangent. While I was supposed to be working on other things, like finishing these Christmas socks or working on present stuff or whatnot, I decided to make a tiny tree sock. This is by Summerly Knits. It's a free little pattern. It's so tiny. I think it uses 24 stitches in the round. So this worked up in like an hour. Not even kidding. So I just used a random scrap ball because I was like really, really wanting to try the pattern. And I just shirked all my responsibilities for that evening. And I just knit a little sock and I blocked it. It is so cute. And every time I see it on my shelf, I just smile and I'm happy. So I definitely need to make more. But just a little tangent. I did make this one single sock in December. Don't have a plan for it, but it makes me happy. So I'm glad I made it. I used, I don't even remember. The colorway is called Starry Night. I can't remember the dyer, My mom got me this yarn. I'll have to look it up. I'll make sure to include it down below. Also in December, I made 2 other pairs of socks, and I'll make sure to link the video up above as well as down below, but I set out to knit some DK weight socks for my grandparents. We were in Utah for Christmas, and I wanted to make sure to go out and visit them. They are like a 3-hour drive from my in-laws where we were staying, but I wanted to make it a priority to go visit them. They had not met my daughter yet, and I just didn't know how much longer we would have with my grandparents, and actually my grandfather has since passed away. And so I'm really, really grateful that we could make that trip out there. So I decided kind of last minute, like right before we traveled to Utah, to go and get some yarn so I could knit some socks for my grandparents. My grandma is a knitter as well, but she has never knit socks. She's knit mittens and stuff though, so she totally could knit socks. But she's, I think, been intimidated by the process. She's never knit them, and so she was always commenting on how beautiful my socks were and all the great skills I was learning and how I'd become such a great knitter, and she was always really impressed. And so I wanted to make some socks for my grandparents. So I made a purple pair for my grandma and an orange pair for my grandpa. I used Cozy Merino from Loops and Threads, so again the Michaels brand, and it was like a merino acrylic blend, DK weight yarn, and so I decided to do those socks for them so that it could be, you know, something last minute. I could go to the store, I grabbed it, I was able to knit them, and I tried to knit a pair of socks in a day. So check out that video to see how I did, but I was able to finish both pairs of socks in less than a week for my grandparents and give them their socks. So I don't have any finished photos. And again, I just followed the Crazy Sock Ladies DK weight vanilla sock pattern for those, and grateful that I was able to do that. It was a lot of work, and after that I was kind of burnt out on socks, to be honest. There was kind of a lull where I didn't really enjoy making socks very much after this crazy sprint in December. Moving into the new year, one of my first FOs for 2022 was this next pair of socks, and my big problem with this pair of socks was that I had worked on them for so long. I think I cast on in October or beginning of November, and because they were such a long-standing whip, my gauge is a little bit messed up because I wasn't as careful about knitting them. So you can see it's a little bit loose right here. One sock fits me better than the other, like in a way that I can actually feel. But this is using Sewrella yarn. All Too Well is the sock set. This is the color All Too Well. This is Folklore. This is from her Taylor Swift collection. Beautiful, beautiful color. So cool to see the micro striping. I really, really liked it. Seeing this color work up. Beautiful, beautiful. And my plan was to, I think, have them done in time for the release of Taylor Swift's album, which was like November 12th, for her 10-minute version of All Too Well, which is just like, gets me. I clearly did not have them ready in time for November 12th. So, or November 10th, or whenever it was. Anyway, I finished them in January. My gauge is not great. The socks definitely fit differently. I think this sock might fit a little better. But this was actually my very first time knitting a pair of vanilla socks without following a pattern at all. Like, I just did this from my brain. Literally didn't even look at a vanilla sock pattern. So I was super proud of myself to be able to come up with the numbers, the heel especially, being able to do the heel and the heel flap and gusset without looking at a pattern. That was monumental for me. Super proud of myself. And so even though these socks don't fit very great, they don't fit exceptionally well because my gauge is a little bit wonky on these. I'm really proud of these socks and what they mean in my sock knitting journey. So these were a leftover whip from 2021. I have another very long-standing whip that I will show you in a little bit. But in the meantime, I wanted to make some socks for my daughter for a special video, and I'll link that up above as well as down below. But I wanted to try out some sock yarns from Michaels and to kind of compare and contrast the making experience as well as the wear of these socks and how they work as socks. There was a couple yarns that I wanted to try out and just to kind of compare. These 3 pairs of socks I knit in February. I used a modified version of the Magic Heel Sock by Autumn Acorn, where basically it's a tube sock, but for the heel section you include a special pattern in order to make that part stretchier and be able to fit over a heel. So they work really well for children where the foot length is changing so that their heel location actually changes a little so that their sock can still fit them as they grow a little. And it's also good for making gifts for other people where you don't quite know exactly where the heel placement should be, but you know generally where it should be. That's what this pattern is good for. Anyway, I made 3 identical pairs of socks using sock yarns from Michaels. I use, let's see, this is Loops and Threads Perfect Pair. The colorway is called Secret Garden, and I am obsessed with it. I am so excited to use the leftovers to make a pair for myself. Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it, I love it, I love it, I love it, I love it. And this is Loops and Threads Woolike, which is super, super soft. Finger and weight yarn, really lightweight acrylic. I'd seen some people knit socks out of them or use it for like a contrast color or whatever, so I decided to try it. Not good for socks. It's not very elastic. They're very soft, so I think that it would be great for a garment. Not elastic. I don't know as far as like how they work, but they slide off my daughter's feet a lot because the ribbing just isn't like holding it in place. It just gets stretched out. So not a great sock option. Oh, the color is called Rose, I think, but it's definitely like a mauvey purple. And then I also knit Paton's Kroy. This is their color FX socks. They turned out way bigger than the other socks, and I think it's because it's a gauge issue. Paton's Kroy is not fingering weight yarn. In my personal opinion, it is a sport weight yarn. They turned out bigger, but because the yarn itself is thicker, they still fit my daughter all right. They're very, very sturdy, warm socks, non-superwash. These Perfect Pair socks, it's vegan. It's a very elastic yarn too. It was a nice experiment, and I'll be doing other videos kind of like that, testing out knit picks yarn, maybe hobby yarn, things like that. So let me know if you want to see some more sock yarn trial videos like that. Then this is my last whip from 2021 as far as socks go. This one has a saga. Oh my goodness, to tell about it. This is my pair of apple socks, is what I called them. The colorway is called Basket of Apples. It's by Divine Yarn, which is local to my family in upstate New York. And then I used Lang Yarn Jawool in some greeny color that I thought would pull out the green specks in this hand-dyed colorway. Oof, these socks. I wanted to knit a toe-up pair of socks. I probably started them in September. They were working really, really, really slowly, probably because I just didn't know quite how far to make the foot before starting the gusset. And I've since learned that I don't really like doing gusset increases because it makes each round longer and longer and longer, and so you can kind of slug through it. And when I finally finished my first toe-up sock of this, it didn't fit well. It didn't look good on top. It wasn't fitting great. It was too loose. The pattern I followed, not a great fit. It didn't work. So I unraveled it and started again, cuff down. And they worked out so much better. They fit me so much better. I also had run out of some reinforcement thread to add to the heels and toes. So I rearranged where I put the reinforcement thread to just be the front half of the toe, and I think still on the entirety of the heel. So I was able to not run out of the reinforcement thread the second time around, and the socks fit so much better. This is my first pair of real, true shorty socks for myself. Finally got them done. Hallelujah. So I was finally finished with all the whips from 2021. I decided to knit a pair of socks that I designed myself. I mentioned that my husband's family's in Utah. I went to school there, and I really miss the mountains of Utah. It'd be so fun to go on mountain hikes, spend some time in the canyon, all that stuff. And so I decided to make a pair of socks as like an ode to mountains. So these are the Mountains Call socks. I used Paton's Kroy for this black because I thought it would be the cheapest neutral I could get. Again, kind of a pain, kind of hurt my hands because I was trying to knit this it was like a sport weight yarn to a fingering weight gauge, so it kind of hurt my hands to knit with this to the gauge I needed. And I used some scraps. I think this is like a Stroll tweed, and these are both Sewrella yarns. So I knit those and made my own design, and I recently released the pattern, so that's super exciting. I'll put the link down below. The pattern is sized from baby, 32 stitches in the round, all the way up through adult extra large, which is 80 stitches in the round. And I'll show you my most recent finished object is a pair of baby socks. We'll talk about those in a minute. But yeah, so excited to have my very first knitting pattern, it's a feat. I'm really proud of myself. These are a cuff down sock with a heel flap and gusset construction. It's kind of what I've fallen into as my preferred method of knitting socks at the moment. That's what I'm comfortable with. My next pair of socks that I finished, these are called the Daily Socks by Summer Lee Knits. These are like vanilla plus socks. Pretty easy texture to knit up, and I really enjoyed it. Because the gauge is different, it felt like it took it longer than it would have normally because this is like 40 rounds. Only that big, so not very long. So it took me a very long time to finish the first sock because they were just I would kind of pick them up randomly and work on them a little bit. And then once I started working on them again, I worked on them a bunch on our trip to Arizona. I'll put the vlog up above as well as down below, the link so you can find that. So I did a ton of work on this pair while I was in Arizona, and that just kind of kick-started my desire to finish them, and so I did just very recently, which is so fun. I love this colorway. It's by Olivia and Oliver Fibers, and the color Eggnog and Caramel is a contrast. Super cute. These are ankle socks, larger than shorties, but not by too much, because I just did my normal round count for the leg, and going back, I would have made it a little bit longer, I think. We are getting close to the end. I had already mentioned these, but these are my baby version of Mountains Call socks. I'm going to give these to my sister-in-law. She's having a baby in a few months. And instead of doing that heel flap and gusset, I just did ribbed texture so that they stick on baby's feet better, and in a similar fashion to how the Magic heel sock can, depending on how the foot grows, the heel position can change. Same idea. So they can wear them for a while, I hope. Ta-da! Use the same scraps as I used for the other pair of Mountains Call socks. Except for this. I think this is some other Knit Picks yarn, maybe Hawthorne fingering. Just a little mini scrap that I got from a friend. So that was the very last pair of socks that I finished knitting. I'll show you the pair that I am currently working on. These are the Reverie socks by Allison Lutz of Field Wonderful. This is in Pom Pom Magazine issue 40. This is the pattern I'm working on right now for the Summer Dreams Cal that Just Go JS Threads 14 and I are hosting over on Instagram. So if you want to make a pattern from Pom Pom Magazine issue 40 and be entered to win prizes for our knit along, then hit us up there on Instagram to learn more about it. Deadline is first day of summer. It's June 21st, so you definitely have time. Ta-da! I am almost done with the leg on my second sock. For my first sock, I finished the heel, and I'm on the foot. Maybe 15 rounds after the colorwork portion. So it's coming along pretty good. Garter stitch, short row heel, so that is very new construction. And then I also have baubles, which are seriously my favorite part of the sock, because the color just shows up so well as like a rainbow on this sock. This yarn is by Daisy Stitch Co. Some mystery skeins I bought. I'm really loving these socks. I don't think they'll take too long because I only started them a couple weeks ago. So they're knitting up great. And that is my last pair of socks that I've worked on this past year. I don't have any other long-standing whips, any other like lingering socks that I haven't made. I've been really good about not having a second sock syndrome issue, because as soon as I finish the first sock, I can't start on the second sock. And you know, the beginning is starting is kind of a pain to like make sure that you're ready to cast on, but as far as like the cuff and leg are usually the easiest parts of the sock. I have not had a problem with that. I do not have any unmatched socks lying around. Honorable mention I wanted to mention. This is related to a question that someone also asked me. Have I ever crocheted a pair of socks? I have. I finished this pair in February. This is the Jack and Jill sock pattern by Snowdrop Creates. Until I have a cat because there's hair everywhere. The color is called Kismet, and the yarn dyer is now known as Yarn Nouveau. It's a beautiful mint with all sorts of different speckles. So pretty. The way that crochet fabric fits is very different than knit fabric, and so these fit different than my knit socks. I definitely want to crochet more socks before I put out a final verdict. They're very snug, I will say. The pattern itself is very well written with lots of math instructions to be able to make them exactly fit to size. They're a little tricky to get on over my heel, but I can still wear them and they fit really, really well. I think they're beautiful. So yeah, honorable mention, not knitting, but crochet. And did I even count these? I didn't count these. Well, technically I have 24 pairs of socks in my first year of knitting socks, but one pair is crocheted. That's kind of fun to share. Alright, hello makers, from Editing Emily here. So I was realizing as I was editing this video that it was getting really long and there were a lot of edits to be made, and I figured that it would be better to come out with a two-part video for the soccer parade and have part one come out today when you're watching this on Friday, and then next week, probably Tuesday or Wednesday, then I'll come out with the part two where I will go over some questions that my Instagram followers asked me about all things knitting socks. So I'll be able to share a little video about that next week that you can watch. I'll make sure to link that down below and up above once that video is out. But I wanted to thank you so much for being here and following along on my journey to learn how to knit and to see all the socks that I knit this past year. it was really surprising how many socks I actually was able to make and how much joy it has brought me. I've tried lots of different things, and I am really excited for the socks that are to come. I have designs in mind. I have other plans for new skills to learn. I'll have a video coming up sharing my goals for summer sock camp on the socks I hope to knit up during summer sock camp. And so lots more to come as far as socks go, and I hope that you will stick around for that. Until next time, happy making. Bye.